Welcome to another episode of my Wake Up Call. This is the podcast where I get to know people a little or a lot, and I want to share them with you, our listeners, and when this shows up on YouTube, our viewers. And really looking forward to having Greg Williams on. I've known him for several years because we're both a member of this group, the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches Group. And uh, and if you're one of our listeners, you know that I am really smitten by people who have a generosity of deed and spirit. And Greg is close to the top, if not at the top of such people. There's something about him that just emanates goodwill, generosity, gratitude, all those things, and it's contagious. And so I'm glad to have him on. He's joining us from New Jersey. And let me tell you a little bit about him. He's a people person. He cares for the well-being of others, and that's going to come out really quick and really soon. And that's why he teaches people how to negotiate while reading body language to increase their value and get more from every negotiation. And he's presented negotiation and reading body language training and consultations to people in 17 countries. 17 countries. He's a Harvard-trained negotiator with a wealth of 30 plus years of negotiation and reading body language experience. He's known as the master negotiator and body language expert. He's an accomplished author, speaker, trainer, and he's written 7 books covering those topics. The research firm Global Gurus has double ranked Greg in negotiation and body language amongst the top 30 gurus worldwide. Leaders Hum has named him to the power list of the 200 most prominent voices in leadership. And as I mentioned, he's also a member of Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches. And he's been a TV news contributor. He's appeared on all U.S. major television networks and some in other countries. And he's also appeared in 3 films highlighting his negotiation and body language expertise. So, Greg, I'm so pleased to share you with my listeners.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, Mark. And it is a sheer pleasure to be with you today because, as you indicated a moment ago, I love to share whatever insights I have that can help others improve their life.
Well, and I want to find out about some of your childhood. Greg was telling me a little bit of it before we started recording, and I said, Greg, let's save it for the podcast. So tell us a little bit about your childhood influences. And I like to quote a late mentor of mine, a fellow named Warren Bennis, big leadership guy. And he said, try to be a first-class noticer. Mm-hmm. And noticing's different than looking, watching, and seeing. And you're an amazing noticer just in terms of you being a body language expert. But as a child, what did you notice around you? And what kind of grabbed your attention? Tell us about that and tell us the story of Greg.
Well, it's interesting that you ask and you make mention of noticing a lot. When I was a kid, we were taught kids should be seen and not heard, which meant I didn't realize it, but I was honing my noticing skills even back then. And I grew up in call it what it is. It was a very poor environment. And as the result of that, my parents allowed me to shine shoes at the corner bar, which was only 3 houses away, when I was 4 years old. That allowed me the opportunity to observe how people would go into the bar with one state of mind, come out with a completely different state of mind. And unbeknownst to me at that time, I was actually reading their body language, not understanding truly what I was observing, but I knew instinctively that based on their demeanor, I had to adjust to match it, and I'd get an extra nickel, a dime, or whatever be the case. As I grew up, still as a young kid, I watched my mother and grandmother negotiate for everything. And no matter how good of a deal appeared to be, they would always ask, well, can you do a little better? Can you give just a little more? And I remember one time saying to my mother, Mom, it's embarrassing that you're always asking for a better deal. We're always asking people to give you a little bit more. Man, they're going to think we're poor. And she looked at me. She said, well, we are, number one. And the more of your money you keep, the more of it you'll have to do with what you choose. And I was like, that makes sense. So I started learning negotiation lessons just by observing, by noticing what my mother and grandmother did when we were out and about, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll tell you, given the fact that if you could reach, let's say, 100 of the friends that I grew up with, 95% of them would be, or 95 of them would probably be in jail, drugs, prostitution, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel as though, for whatever reason, I was allowed to go into a different environment. And because of that, I have the need, the desire to really give back to people these days, Mark. And that's the purpose of my life at this point.
So it sounds like the perspective of being grateful that you escaped the fate of a lot of those 100 people, and that you feel compelled to give back to the world. And something that my listeners are aware of, I think you're aware of. I'm facing some health challenges, and I've always lived to give, for whatever reason, but now I literally give to live, literally, and I find that when I'm giving, it feels like my cup runneth over. So it feels like I'm coming from abundance. So much so, I have trouble asking for anything because that feels like I'm coming from scarcity. But I literally feel the more that I can give, the more alive I feel.
And I can truly understand that. First of all, you truly are a giving soul. And that's yet something else that I respect about you. You're not a selfish individual. You're someone that truly does seek to improve the lives of others. And you constantly have displayed that whenever I've been around you. And believe me, I have a tendency just to observe someone's body language when they don't even know I'm doing so that I can get a real insight about what's behind the mask, as it were. You, my friend, are genuine, and I truly appreciate you even more so because of that.
Well, thank you. But let's get back to you becoming a first-class noticer right from your childhood, and take us along the way, and a little bit about your early schooling, what you noticed, what you refined, and tell us about that.
Well, I wasn't a good student at all. I didn't learn to read until I was in the 8th grade. And sometimes I was mischievous. I remember one time the class was going on some type of class trip. I don't recall what I did, but whatever it was that I did, it caused me to be left behind. Just the teacher said, no, you're not going on the class trip or anything of that nature. But what that did teach me was how to maneuver my way around particular situations such that, hey, I learned that lesson once. Okay, I won't do that again, type of thing. Now, the reason I mention that is because my motto is you're always negotiating. That which you do today either positions you for the opportunities or lack of tomorrow. And thus, you have to always be mindful of what it is that you are doing today to position yourself for tomorrow. Okay, back to school. So, as I progressed through early grade school, then middle school, the one thing I discovered, thinking that I was dumb, stupid, being told that constantly in the younger years of my life, that I could play baseball extremely good. I mean, I was a very good baseball player. And I think I was in the 4th grade or somewhere in that neighborhood when one of my teachers was asking people if they wanted to play baseball for the school. It was like a little league that the school had. And I raised my hand. And even though she and I were not on overly good terms, because again, I was not nowhere near an A student and I always sat in the back of the room, she was throwing the ball to each of us that said we wanted to possibly participate with this baseball team that the school was forming. And I ended up being the last person that was standing, as it were. And she'd throw the ball harder to me. I'd catch it. I'd throw it a little harder back to her. And we smiled. And upon reflection, I recalled thinking to myself, we just bonded. Again, another lesson that I took forth from that experience throughout life about how to connect better with people. Okay, do a fast forward. So now I'm in high school. I'm a very shy kid. I'm very modest. Do not call my name. I do not know the answer. So please, if I can get down a little lower in my seat, I will, type of thing. I had one particular teacher that said to me, "You're such a smart boy." And prior to that, I was always in the slow section of my grade. He said, "I'm going to take you out of the slow section for your next grade and put you in the medium range." And I was like, wow, okay. He thinks I'm smart. I'm like, well, maybe I am smart. And I'll tell you, Mark, it was having him, a teacher, actually believe that I had some capabilities in myself that I had not seen prior, sparked the imagination of how good can you become if you try to become better. And again, I'll just give a quick synopsis to say that spark was what led me to constantly seek more inside of myself that I never even knew existed. And that's a driving force that I maintain to this day.
So you'd mentioned something that you're discovering talents about yourself, which hopefully leads to greater potential, even though you've already proved enough, you're so accomplished. But what are some of the things that you discovered about yourself that you didn't know were there?
Number one, I'm not dumb. I may have been slow, but what I was afraid of most was failing. I altered my mindset, shifted my paradigm about failure to think of it as another learning process, another step in the learning process. I ran for political office, and one of the things I said to the powers to be at the time was, "I can't speak in front of an audience. Are you going to give me speaking training?" And I was told, "No, you're fine. You're good." And I'm thinking, "No, I'm not." There was that lack of self-assuredness that I possessed. Well, I'll never forget one time I stood up and spoke in front of a VFW, at a VFW meeting, Veterans of Foreign Wars. And I said something along the lines of, "It's because of you, your sacrifices, that I am here today. I truly appreciate the sacrifices that you made, and I will serve you to the best of my abilities if you do decide to give me your vote." I felt something in my heart, Mark. I truly felt something in my heart. And I felt a connection that said, no, you do not need speech training. All you needed is to speak from the heart. And that was another learning moment that I took from that particular situation and used it in other aspects of my life. Now, when it comes to negotiations, I'm always a fair individual, even to the point that when I'm negotiating with someone or negotiating on behalf of an organization that has as the counterpart, let's say someone that's just short of an ogre, truth be known, the only way I can win is if you lose, type of thing, I will still give that person the doubt of thinking there's good there, and I'll seek it out in that individual or entity first. And not until I find out that, okay, yeah, they really will bring the hammer down on you, that I realize I'm not going to be where that hammer lands, and I'll use countermeasures to actually, let's say, alter their perspective about how easy I can be to negotiate with, for sure. But those factors about learning lessons in life, learning more about who it is that you are from the inside out and giving of yourself is something that I truly can appreciate, because we all have gifts that we've been endowed with. And to the degree that we explore them and bring them out, we will know more about the inner self that is possessed within us.
Can you unpack uh, learning and listening to yourself from the inside out? Because, the world seems to be increasingly transactional. And it seems like people who are dyed-in-the-wool transactional, they often don't even understand, what does it mean negotiating from the inside out. So can you elaborate on that?
Oh, for sure. There are times when, if you are purely transactional, you will go in with, I got to grab most of whatever I can get, and that's it. People don't realize, if that's your mantra, that's your perspective of the negotiation, there will come a time when you will be negotiating with someone else, or someone similar to that individual, that will have taught you a lesson as a result of you being in a certain mindset when you were negotiating. Again, you're always negotiating. That even means it impacts the way you think, the way you feel throughout a negotiation. So if a person is transactional in a particular negotiation, they have to realize you may actually win today. But what does that foretell for tomorrow? Will you be the same type of individual? Most likely you won't. And eventually, if you are transactional throughout one session after another, after another, after another, it will catch up to you, because you will never be a long-term perspective negotiator. And that's one thing that great negotiators always maintain, the perspective of there will be a tomorrow. And who knows, the person I'm negotiating with today may know the person I'm negotiating with tomorrow. And thus, the person tomorrow has gotten information from the person today. And you have to know how to position yourself. Truth be known, there are times when you do want to be transactional. And that can be when you're negotiating with someone that's really tough and rough, and you have to stand up to that individual. One of my books is titled Negotiating with a Bully. With that type of individual, you have to stand up and basically say, this is how it's going to be. And doggone it, we're going to end it if by chance you don't alter your behavior, your actions, or things of that nature. Therein lies where being transactional can be a benefit. But other than that, always be long-term perspective in your efforts.
Let me ask you, when I hear the word negotiation, it immediately triggers, oh, this will teach me how to win. And I may not be thinking about a zero-sum kind of negotiation. Well, the only way for me to win is for you to lose. And I bring that up because, your brand is about negotiating, and it doesn't fit with me, your generosity of spirit. And I can see how a lot of people may not care about that. I think the world needs who you are and how you are. And but any thoughts about, have you ever run into that? Like I have a book called Just Listen. It's done pretty well. And I turned away a lot of business because when the book caught on, companies would bring me in and I would just say, you don't care about your people listening. You want me to teach them some of the techniques where they can close more sales. And I would say that's out of integrity for me. I learned listening to save people's lives. And you want to do a book club and you like the book, knock yourself out. But, it's kind of like the inventors of NLP, Grinder and Bandler.
Mm-hmm.
They emphasize this will enable you to manipulate other people, but the spirit of our inventing this is not for you to manipulate people, but for you to be able to connect with people according to, their visual, auditory, kinesthetic kind of channels. And I know there's, and Robert Cialdini, the great writer on influence, he said the same thing. The spirit of this is really to influence people for the common good. And he would warn people, you will be able to use this to manipulate people. And of course, I think one of the reasons those approaches became so popular is that the majority of people wanted to use them to win and manipulate others. And so I'm just sort of sharing that because I know your brand is Master Negotiator, but you're so much more. I mean, you're so much more of a human being than what I think of when I think of the word. I'm a negotiator. Oh, you must win a lot. So I'm sorry I was so verbose, but any thoughts about what I just said?
Well, yeah, yes. First of all, again, I go back to my motto: you're always negotiating. When you actually said to some of the potential clients that wanted to bring you in that you weren't really, or they weren't really aligned with your mission, you were negotiating with them, and thus they more than likely found a source that they could use to accomplish their goals. We all do the exact same thing. We negotiate, and for someone to think that negotiation may be bad, I calm them down immediately by saying, well, we're negotiating right now. How so? Well, we're exchanging information, and thus we're giving each other the perspectives that we have about whatever we are discussing. Negotiations is about the information gathering process and being able to use it for the vast majority for good. As I said, some people will definitely try to use it for bad, but that's with any realm of any aspect that we engage in life. And thus, there are times when, and by me having the aspect of being able to read body language, I can discern when someone says one thing and their body speaks differently, that the person's mind is truly not aligned with their words. And I gain an advantage in that way, which I don't try to take advantage of anyone. I never, never, ever attempt to take advantage of anyone because I am open, I'm giving, but my goodness, as the result of being a good negotiator, you also have to know how to play hardball. So, am I a nice person? Yes, I am. But truth be known, and I do mean but in this case, I can be your worst nightmare if you come at me or my clients in the wrong way. If you want to play hardball in order to push back on you, I will play hardball at a higher level. So now, I say all of that to say, the word negotiate or negotiation is not bad in and of itself. It's just a process that people go through to exchange information per what they are seeking out of a relationship or an engagement.
No, look, I completely agree with you. I guess part of it is, something that's always appealed to me is you just overflow with generosity and caring about the other person and kindness. And in my mind, I understand what you're saying intellectually. I guess part of it is, I'm very sensitive to words.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, there are various words that trigger so many associations in people's minds that, once people have those associations, they're locked into confirmation bias. And, it's interesting. There's a bias against psychiatrists,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I don't know if this will happen, but when people used to introduce me if I was going to speak, they'd say, "You'll like Mark. He's not like a psychiatrist." I could say, "You like Greg. He's not like a negotiator."
Exactly. He's not the used car salesperson that you normally deal with.
Well, there you go.
Mhm.
Can you share more things that you're discovering about yourself that that you hope to explore in your lifetime?
And yes, I can. And Mark, you hit upon part of it about giving to live. And again, I really did not think I had a whole lot of any value in me as a kid growing up. Like I said, I was told basically I was dumb, stupid, yada yada yada. And as a kid, I believed that. It wasn't until I was in my 20s, to be quite frank with you, that I started coming out of that shell even more so than I did when I was in high school. And life smacked me down, and I was like, oh, run back to the shell. But then as I discovered more about my inner abilities, it was like, wow, no one could have ever told me, even when I was in my 30s, that I would write a book. To this day, I cannot spell worth heck. I can't spell without heck. But because of the tools that we have available, I'm able to write. I use Grammarly to check grammar from time to time. Spell check, of course, is on word processors. So those are the aids that I have to this day that allow me to become more of a giving individual because of the nature I find within myself. I communicated with an older associate just this morning that was once an executive director at a hospital that everyone would know if I mentioned the name of it. And she indicated that she had moved on to a different phase of her life. And she said, the one thing I could say about you, you're still giving. And Mark, that's the hallmark upon which I now build my life. Because the generosity part, again, it was instilled in me from the time I was a little kid without me realizing it because we were so poor. My mother and my grandmother would still give food or whatever to the neighbors that didn't have as much as we had. And like I said, we didn't have a whole lot, but they still found a way to give to others. So watching that as a kid and growing up and feeling the need to help and feeling the need to give back is something that's ingrained in me. And my God, it will never, ever, ever leave me. Being able to negotiate, I help people get more of what they otherwise would have simply because they know strategies that they can use in a particular situation to actually get more of a better deal. And again, it's me giving back to others through that means that drives me to this day.
So I'm wondering if, in what you just said about your mother and your grandmother, is that you notice that even though they were poor, giving was still an important part of their nature. And it really impressed upon you that, gee, we don't have that much. And yet they want to give, even though they probably need more from the world. Their default mode was to give. And I'm wondering if they kind of served as heroes to you to inspire you that, well, just because you don't have anything, it doesn't mean you can't give.
Oh, for sure. Not only that, Mark. In the wintertime, there were several winters when the heat was turned off, and me, my sister would have to go next door to the neighbor's house just to wash up, so forth and so on. And I thought to myself as I got older, the neighbors were trying to give back because my mother and my grandmother had given. And it was a continuous cycle of people helping people that were in need of help. So seeing my mother, my grandmother, not having a whole lot, but finding a way to make ends meet, and they did it through their negotiation efforts. But being able to give stuff back to other people also was again something that was ingrained in me. And Mark, one of the things that I really love doing now, there are times, and sometimes people call me out on it. I will interact with someone, and just when they're talking about how to get a better deal or something of that nature, and if I see someone that I feel as though is being taken advantage of or could do a better job of getting more of what they want, I will walk in and actually introduce myself as Greg Williams, and I'll just leave it at that. And I'll ask the person that they're negotiating with, is that really the best deal you can give? Now, did you notice my head movement also? Is that really the best deal you can give? I mean, body language plays a huge part in the negotiation process, because is that the best deal you can give them? Says I'm backing away from the statement. I'm leaning into it, and the tilting of the head is one of inquisitiveness. So it's like, is that really the best deal you can give someone? And I'm also, you see me nodding my head, yes. So I'm trying to lead the person through that gesture too. And I've actually helped people in that particular manner. So again, if we seek ways to be of value to others, situations will always avail themselves to allow us to do so. And I seek them constantly, constantly.
I remember I wrote something about making a distinction between uh, givers, takers, and receivers. And so at this stage of my life, I really gravitate towards people who are natural born givers. Uh, I don't ask for anything, but natural born givers, respond to generosity with generosity. I mean, and sometimes they take the lead with generosity. And whereas takers, uh, I've decided that I don't, I don't wish them harm. I just wish them away. And I identify them. And uh, in fact, I think my gut will be informing me: is this a giver? Is this a taker? Is this a receiver? Now, a receiver are people that are happy to receive, but they come more from scarcity than abundance. So they don't naturally ask you what they can do for you. If you ask them, they will. Takers, if you ask them, they'll basically, no, I can't do that. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Receivers, if you ask them, they will check a box, delegate the task to someone else, and never follow up on it. So with zero enthusiasm, they will reciprocate if you ask them. Whereas givers, it's just part of the nature. You and I think, have a giving relationship with each other. That's why I wanted to share you with our listeners. And takers, I guess this is being a little bit passive aggressive, or maybe aggressive. When I'm dealing with a taker, I will automatically come up with several things of equal value that they can do for me. And I'll often say, that reminds me of something that you might do for me. And they will find ways to say that they can't do it. Mm. And they won't be rude. They'll just be showing their true nature. And I'll say, one of the kinds of people that I can't stand are people who, give something, offer to give someone, and then they take it back. And I just became one of those people. And they'll say, what? Yeah, those 3 things I said I would do for you, not going to happen. Not in my lifetime. Not in your lifetime. Well, what do you mean? Well, I gave you every opportunity to be someone, that, I guess this is part of a negotiation, to be someone who would reciprocate. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you failed all of them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, Mark, that's an excellent way to actually weed out those that would just, if they could, stick their 4 fingers or whatever in your brain and just suck all the brain power out of you, for sure. And truth be known, I will give some individuals that I sense are real takers an opportunity to take. And like you posed a moment ago, because you're always negotiating, I will then ask them for something very small, very, very small. And the reason I do that is because, my goodness, I make it as easy as possible for them to reciprocate. And truth be known, if they can't reciprocate over something that small, they have then given me validation that they are takers. And Mark, being the type of individual I am, my motto is fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me type of thing. So I will give somebody a second shot to prove that they can actually become something other than what I thought they were. And then after 2 times, for sure, if I see that they are takers, I will politely find a way to disengage with them. And if they ask for something else, depending upon what it is, I may send them to the website and say, hey, it's free. You can go there. But I'm not really going to invest a whole lot more time in a relationship with that type of person, because that person has already shown me not once, but twice exactly what type of individual they are. And one thing I would suggest to people is that you surround yourself with givers. I talked about how the neighbors would allow me and my sister to come over and wash up when the heat was turned off in the winter when we were kids. Again, imagine if my mother and grandmother had given, and then when it came time for us to need something in return, the neighbor said no. I'm sure. My grandmother was someone to deal with, and I'll leave that at that for the listener or viewer to make his or her own assessment. But in truth, you did not really mess around with my grandmother. She would tell you exactly where you were, where she stood in a heartbeat. So I saw the harsher side of reality about the negotiation process from her. But hey, so be it. I learned from that perspective too. But again, I suggest to people, surround yourself with givers, because in so doing, from my perspective, you will become embedded in a more giving society.
No, no, I'm really fortunate. I mean, as I've shared with people, and my listeners know about this, and I've gone public when I've shared with people the health challenges I'm facing. What's amazing is it's like I'm hearing eulogies without having to be dead already.
Oh.
No, I mean the things that people are saying, including you. I mean, we've had conversations, and you've been so gracious and giving, you know, and generous. Call me, Mark. Add me to your 24/7 club. I want to brainstorm a little bit with you because, um, I come up with book titles, I come up with things, um, and 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 I'm always, I wouldn't say reinventing the world, the wheel. It's just my mind is very creative, and so one of the things I'm probably not going to, be on the speaker circuit. I'm going to try to take care of myself and my family. But one of the things that was a title that I use, given the book Just Listen, was Listen for a Change.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
like it's a double entendre or maybe
Mhm.
more. And so I'm trying to think of negotiate. Well, maybe I think you're always negotiating. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think uh, I think that's it. You're always negotiating, and people will pause. Do I agree with that? And then, oh yeah, I think I agree with that, and I could be better at it. So I think I think that's a lovely line. You're always negotiating. Uh, I haven't checked your website lately, but it's the kind of line that I would encourage to be front and center uh, on your website. You're always negotiating because people will pause and feel challenged by that. And I think most people would then say, he's right. he's right. And I could probably be better at it.
Well, I appreciate that for sure, my friend. And I'll tell you something else, Mark. You spoke about the eulogies that you feel as though you're receiving now, and boy, I didn't realize how blind I'm starting to become. My gosh! But I'll just say this for a moment: you have given so much to so many people that people just naturally embrace you for the goodness that you possess and the generosity that you bestowed on so many people around the world. And that's why you are so beloved. Now, we're not going to turn this into a love fest or anything of that nature for sure. But Mark, you've done your goodness, and thus your rewards are coming to you as a result of the efforts that you put into helping people such as myself become a better individual. You've deserved it. You earned it for sure. Now, got to put the glasses back on because I can't see that well as I get older. It's like, what the heck is going on here? Am I still around? But you made mention a moment ago about my tagline, "You're always negotiating," and you mentioned earlier that you and I are both members of Marshall Goldsmith's 100 Coaches. I'm going to make an announcement right here, and it'll be stay tuned for more. But Marshall has actually agreed to co-author my next book, which will be book number 8 with me. And I'm going to take into consideration exactly what you said about leading with "you're always negotiating" to make somebody go, huh? Oh, okay. Tell me more, type of thing for sure. So I thank you for that. That's a
That's
long way to say thank you.
well, I gave Jennifer McCollum the title for her book in her own words. So, and here's the distinction. Uh, uh, One of the things I suggest to leaders is to be declarative as opposed to explanatory. It was it was the Declaration of Independence. It wasn't the explanation of independence. And when you're declarative, it's like you're putting a stake out in the sand and saying, "I declare this to be true." Not to get into politics, but I think one of the factors that contributed to Donald Trump beating Hillary Clinton is Trump was always declarative, whereas Hillary Clinton, to show that she was competent and she'd done her due diligence, she was often explaining. And in her effort to demonstrate her competence, her immense competence, I had a saying, "Me think the lady doth explain too much." And so you're always negotiating is a declaration.
Yes, yes. And that's yet another reason I love it for sure. I'll tell you something else too, Mark. I remember I was a member of an association, and I'm going to protect the innocent in this particular case. And it was the president of that association at the time that said to me, "You talk about negotiations all the time. People don't negotiate all the time." And this was a woman that had worldwide contracts with sport entities throughout the world, as I said a moment ago. And I thought to myself, wow, and she doesn't realize that she's negotiating with these folks in all aspects of her business dealings with them. So I say that to say, as a declarative statement, "you're always negotiating," really will ring loudly to a lot of people, especially those that are asleep about that fact. So thank you again.
Well, you just triggered something, but your brand is the negotiator. So I'm sure that woman would agree. Aren't you always trying to influence others?
I wish I had posed that question to her.
And I think she might say yes, whereas she might have been triggered by "you're always negotiating." No, I'm not a used car salesman.
Yes,
and,
yes,
And
yes.
and I think your brand is too well established. But I think someone else could run with a book. "You're always influencing." Meaning you're always having an impact, either by commission, omission, how you show up, how you don't show up. And I think,
And go ahead. I'm sorry.
and I think people might lean into that, whereas, sometimes the knee jerk reaction about certain words that are very charged, you know, can trigger, already a bias against it because of the charge on the word.
Exactly. I had another associate that was a founder of another association that I'm a member of. And I remember I was training under her at one particular point in time. And of course, I asked her, well, can you do a little better with the cost? Now, I use cost in certain cases as opposed to investment to make a distinction of, with an investment, you're going to get a return. A cost is something that's gone. And she said, I never negotiate. I hate to negotiate. And I said, well, how did you come up with the price that you decided to charge? And she said, well, I just figured it was a good number. I said, okay, based on what? And she said, well, based on what others told me. I said, and how did they come up with that number? She said, Greg, I catch what you're doing, but I don't know, and I don't want to negotiate, and I don't like to. And I said, okay, I understand that, and I appreciate it. I said, I'm going to stop. But let me just ask you this one last question. And the last question was, do you feel as though you may be cheating people out of the pleasure of engaging in a negotiation? And she said, I never thought about that. I said, okay, well, the next time we interact, I'm going to seek the pleasure of a negotiation with you. And she said, I told you to stop it like that. But, it was a fun aspect that I brought into the conversation because, like you said, some words trigger people, and some people will tell me immediately, I hate to negotiate. Now, you noticed how I even said that. I hate to negotiate. And it's like, yeah, and it's coming through too, through your body language even. The word negotiate is something, again, that we do constantly, all the time, and the strategies that you develop will help you obtain more or less of what it is that you're seeking as your goal. So the point is, call it whatever you wish, and understand when you're being triggered by the word itself, that it still contains value. And if you do it better, you will always come out further ahead, be it even if you wanted to do a 40-60 split and give the other party the 60. There's a way to do that and make that person go, wow, that was really nice. So what have you done for future negotiations? You've shown someone through that act alone that not only are you an equitable person, but you will be fair with them. You will not attempt to take advantage of them. And hey, maybe the next time the person will turn around and say, look, you gave me the 60 and you took the 40 the last time. How about if you take the 60 this time? My goodness, you have built one heck of a relationship going forward from that point on, for sure. So again, my motto, you're always negotiating, and just be mindful of the fact that negotiation is not a bad word.
One of my techniques, and I guess I infuse things with a certain kind of humor and irony. One of my techniques is to sometimes mention, can I tell you what a deal breaker is for me? What?
Go for it.
Here's my deal breaker. I don't want to win so big at your expense that your boss tells you that you caved and gave away too much. You get a demotion, you go out and get drunk, and you drive into a tree. That's off the table. I will not win so big at your expense that happens to you. And then I'll say, but of course, I'm not going to let that happen to me either.
Exactly. We got this yin and yang thing going on, but it's going to be even somewhere in the middle for sure.
So where can people, what's the best way for people to find out more about you? Because they're going
to, they can go to themasternegotiator.com. That's THEMASTERNEGOTIATOR.com. They can also send me an email at Greg, that's GREG, at themasternegotiator.com. And as I said earlier, I have a ton of free information on my website. You can look at the blogs, you can look at the other stuff that you can download for free there, and just have at it, because you're always negotiating. And to the degree that you do it better, you will have more of what you seek in life.
Well, I will say you're always giving. So, and I appreciate our friendship and how much you've given to me and how much you've just given to our listeners. So if you're listening in, please go to his site, because you will find all kinds of free and valuable things that can help you to negotiate better. And also, if you find those and he's availing you of his giving and his generosity, don't be a taker, reciprocate. Reach out to him and say, how can we work together? Because you'll be the better for it. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for your enormous friendship too. Much appreciated.
Well, and I appreciate you. And to our listeners, I appreciate all of you. And this podcast is all done through word of mouth. I don't have a social media team, and it just got bumped up into the top 0.5% globally. And it's all through word of mouth. And I want to thank all of you who listen for sharing this with whoever you share this with. And until next time, everyone, take good care. Thank you, Greg. Bye.